We've got to get to the top now, Sabrina said. No can do, people, he said, his voice trailing off. Sabrina realized something had captured his gaze. She turned to follow had captured his attention. She turned to follow his gaze and saw the witch's good eyes staring through the front door arms. A second later, its enormous hand smashed through the entrance and snaked down the lobby. Its huge, greedy fingers were aimed right at the Grimms and Puck. Sabrina did the only thing she could think of. She dragged her family past the security guard and into the waiting elevator at the end of the hall. She scanned the dozens of buttons and found the one she wanted. Observation deck. Then the doors closed and the elevator started to rise. You know, I lived in the city for years and I've never been open to the top. And I've never been to the top, Puck said. I hope the souvenir shop is still open. The elevator came to a stop. When the door opened, a blast of cold air and snow hit their faces. Through it, they could just see the outline of a hot air balloon tangled on top of the building. Oz was frantically trying to unfasten several ropes that had caught on the building's spire. The basket swayed dangerously in the wind, dumping some of its contents onto the roof of the building. Turn the witch off! Sabrina shouted. Oz looked down and snarled. Mr. Diggs, someone's going to get hurt, Granny added. That is, if they haven't already. You fools! Oz shouted from his basket. What do I care if a bunch of humans die? The Master has promised me that I will rule over them all. A few lives mean nothing to me. Sabrina looked over the edge of the building. The witch had begun to climb the facade, digging her huge hands into the building's concrete frame. It reminded Sabrina of a movie she had seen once. Oz, you told me you were my mother's best friend, she called out to the wizard. She trusted you. Regardless of your plans, I don't think you wanted to hurt her. I didn't. He told me he had a big plan for your parents. He said they'd give birth to a future where ever ancestors ruled the world. Sabrina glanced down again. The witch was now only a dozen floors away from them. Oz paid no attention. He continued to cut his ropes one by one. Puck's wings popped off his back and flapped fiercely. If you try to fly away from here, I will blast a hole in your little balloon. I swear it. If Oz was worried about the threat, it didn't stop him. He cut the last rope and then waved goodbye. In a flash, Sabrina did something she never would have guessed she had the courage to do. She grabbed the loose rope. Her brain told her to let go. In fact, it was begging her to, but she refused, even as she soared higher and higher into the air. She knew what she was doing was insane. She might die, but the alternative was worse. She couldn't live knowing she'd let her parents kidnap her get away. Let go, you foolish child, Oz shouted from above. Sabrina could see he was struggling to untie the rope she was holding onto, but he was having no success. How do I wake them up? Sabrina cried, pulling herself hand over hand up the rope. How do I wake up my parents? This is all pointless, Sabrina. You can't fight the Master over me. The future is coming. Now let go. No! Sabrina had reached the basket. She grabbed onto the side. The wizard's face filled with sorrow. Then I'm sorry, Sabrina. He pushed her hand and she lost her grip. She snatched his hand, but grabbed something small and silver instead. The remote control. The wind filled her ears like a lion's roar, and she could feel gravity pulling her toward the ground. Chapter 10. Sabrina! She heard someone shouting her name over the wind. Sabrina, I've got you! And then she wasn't falling anymore. She rubbed the coldness out of her eyes. Puck had her in his arms and was grinning at her as she flew them back up to the top of the building. The robot witch was there, now practically on top of Rhoda, and Daphne panicked. Sabrina pointed the little silver controller at the monster and pushed at the dozen buttons. Just as the robot was about to squash her family, it froze. Puck touched down next to Granny and Daphne. The little girl was in hysterics and hugged Sabrina tighter than she ever had. Granny joined the hug. Come on, people, Puck said. Did you really think I was going to let you die? Daphne pulled away from Sabrina for a moment. She sniffled and then held out something to her sister. This fell out of the balloon. It was their mother's journal. Sabrina took it and opened it. In the back was the yellowing paper. Veronica's speech was still inside. By the light of the witches still glowing up, Granny Rhoda took the speech and quickly read it to herself. A proud smile spread across her face. She handed it back to Sabrina. I think the Ever After should hear this. I could give it to Puck. He could read it to them. Liebling, these are your mother's words. Sabrina met her grandmother's gaze, lifted her chin and nodded. Okay, we need to get everyone together. Puck, how do we turn this building bright purple? Daphne looked at the witch. Granny, we're going to need an awful lot of forgetful dust, the little girl said. Sabrina sat in the back room at the Golden Egg. Daphne sat behind her with a brush combing her long blonde hair, while Sabrina studied her mother's handwriting. She fluttered over every syllable and comma, hoping that she could somehow do the speech justice. She was not one for speeches, especially in front of Ever Afters. Don't be afraid, Daphne said. I'll be standing right next to you. Good, Sabrina answered. You can deflect the pies and rotten tomatoes they toss at me. I think that only happens in cartoons, Daphne replied. Still, I'll keep an eye out for them. The door opened and Mustard Seed appeared. He smiled and gave the girls a wink. They are ready for you. We're coming, Daphne said, and Mustard Seed gestured that he'd wait in the hall. Do I really have to do this? Sabrina said. What if I screw up? What if I ruin what Mom was trying to do? You won't, Daphne said, as she pulled her sister to her feet. And even if you do, your hair looks fabulous. Thanks. For Jerkazoid, Daphne added with a smile. They joined Mustard Seed in the hallway. He led them into the restaurant, where they found Puck addressing the crowd. He was wearing a jeweled crown, an oversized purple robe, and carrying an enormous scepter. He strode back and forth, trying to seem dignified while struggling with his outfit. Attention, he shouted. There's been a great upheaval in the last few days. My father, your leader, lies dead. I have returned to the kingdom to rule. Get on with it, Puck, one of the dwarves shouted. We lost patience with you nearly half an hour ago. Puck sneered and gestured to Sabrina and Daphne. The girls ducked onto the stage and stared at the crowd. Now I know they're terribly ugly and difficult to look at, Puck said, causing Sabrina to growl. But these girls have got something to say. When they are done, you fools can go back to fighting if you want. He turned to Sabrina and frowned. Good luck, he said. They're a disrespectful bunch. Sabrina looked down at the speech. This was written by my mother, she said. We can't hear you, someone shouted. Speak up. Sabrina looked to her sister for help. You may not talk a lot, but you've never had a problem with volume, Daphne said. Sabrina cleared her throat and started again. This was written by my mother on the eve of her disappearance almost 2 years ago. Suddenly, the crowd was silent. I'm afraid that I will probably never be the speaker my mother was, but I will read it word for word. It outlines ideas for you. I hope it helps. Sabrina looked at her mother's writing, studying the curves of her letters, trying to understand the mind that wrote the words. I will not stand here and claim to know your hearts. You have had difficult lives. You've seen dreams ripped apart. You've watched as suffering came to you like floodwaters. I am human. I am blessed. I live in a world that believes in me. Your very existence defies what humanity can accept. You're supposed to be bedtime stories, not flesh and blood. Thus, you have had to live in the shadows, accepting the table scraps you could find and yearning for a life humans take for granted. It doesn't have to be like this. You're few, but together you are many. Combining your talents, working for one another's benefits, lifting one another up when you fall, this is the path to your happiness. If you could work together as a community, you could build empires with your small numbers, but instead you have chosen to squabble and divide. Well, I say it's time to put hatred aside and hold your brothers and sisters' hands. You don't need humanity to believe in you. You only need to believe in each other. Sabrina continued reading. She did her best to make eye contact with those in the crowd, and she held Daphne's hand for its support. She could feel her mother's thoughts inside her, how Veronica felt about every word she had put in the speech. Veronica described a world that ever afters could embrace, a world where they could work together for the benefit of one another. It was a simple plan based on common sense and a common purpose. She described a government where a majority ruled the day, where a passionate minority could not be trampled. She recommended that leaders be elected rather than born. She talked of schools and hospitals. She spoke of science and technologies, helping them keep pace with the modern world, but mostly she spoke of finding common ground. You are all ever afters, Sabrina concluded. Your neighbor's needs are your needs. His passions are your passions, and his heartbreak is your sorrow as well. If you can treat his struggles as your own, you will celebrate your successes together. It doesn't matter that he may be feathered or furry. It makes no difference if he is on 2 legs or 20. Don't waste time finding differences. When you talk to your neighbors, close your eyes and you will truly see them. After she spoke the last words, she thanked them and stood back, wondering if they would choose her mother's ideas over their own isolation and squabbling. For a long moment there was silence. Sabrina looked at Puck and Daphne and Granny Rhoda, but they were as trapped in the moment as she. And then Mother Goose stood up. Thank you, Sabrina Grimm, daughter of Veronica. You have served your family well, she said, and she began to clap. Others joined her, and soon the entire audience was on its feet clapping. Yahoos, dwarves, pirates, fairies, and goblins alike. Moments later, a familiar chant began. Grim! 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 Tears ran down Sabrina's cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness, but of great pride. Their mother had tried to build something important. For Sabrina, it was the first time since discovering her family history that she truly understood it. Being a Grimm wasn't just being a fairy tale detective. It was being the person who helps when no one else would lend a hand. Being a Grimm was something to be proud of, not something to run from. Granny Rhoda pulled the girls close to her. I'm ready to be part of this family, Sabrina said. I never had any doubts, child, the old woman said, as a tear rolled down her cheek. I never had any doubts. Daphne hugged her sister tightly. I'm glad you're back. I can't do this without you. The family found their car parked on the 3 feet of snow. Mustard Seed blessed it with a little fire and was clean and clear in no time. Mr. Canis got in awkwardly. He was still 7 feet tall and found it difficult to get behind the wheel. He started the car's engine and allowed it to warm up. Hampstead stood nearby. He hadn't spoken to anyone since Mr. Canis had found him sitting in his darkened hotel room. Now he shuffled his feet and looked down at the pavement. Sabrina understood. His broken heart had crushed his spirit. Sabrina was broken-hearted too, though she was working hard not to hide it. Not only was Puck not coming back to Fairyport Landing with them, he hadn't come to say goodbye. You've given us some hope for the future, Mustard Seed said to her. Good luck, Sabrina said, and don't let your brother ruin everything. If he has his way, he'll turn the city into a junkyard he can play in all day. Yes, I remember him just that, Mustard Seed said. Don't worry, Jux the King has other plans. Well, we better get home and find out how to wake up your mom and dad, Granny said to the girls. And the 2 of you need to start your training. Training? What have we been doing all this time? Sabrina asked. Follow me around getting in trouble, the old man said. Now that you both are ready and willing, we're going to explore what's inside the Hall of Wonders. You girls are going to learn to be proper fairy tale detectives. Granny Rhoda and the girls got into the car. Hampstead followed and they all... That seems to be the end of this video. I'll see you later. Goodbye.